Yeah, it looks like we're live, Tracy. So this is wonderful. I want to introduce my audience here, all of you watching and watching in perpetuity, I hope, coming back again and again to a very, very special person, someone I've just met really in the last few months, but has already influenced some of the work we do. There was a particular meeting of a golden civilization on the top of Primrose Hill, and we decided just to open it up and talk to whoever was there, not knowing at all that what we were doing, at least I didn't know at all, that what we were
Oh,
doing
wow.
was attempting something that Traci has made into something very, very special and
Hmm.
happening all over the world. I think it's called Sidewalk Cafe. But Traci, I'm gonna toss it over to you and just say what a privilege is and how excited I am to be here with you and meet you in this call.
Aw. I'm really excited to see your face today. It feels really nourishing to be in connection with you. So I know you've been a little under the weather, so the fact that you made the time for me means a lot. Really means a lot. The name of the project is actually called Sidewalk Talk,
Ah,
although I know you have a lot of English folks, which I know in England you call it pavements, right? Isn't that what they
yeah,
call it?
sometimes, yeah.
Okay. So, I don't know how translatable it is, but we do have some English chapters, so that's pretty cool.
Wonderful, wonderful.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, we want to bring you over. Of course, right now I'm in Massachusetts, so just as your work, where our work is in many places all over the world, and I'm eager to hear more about Sidewalk Talk from you, but also to hear what what are you trying to do with this?
Mm,
How does it actually work, and what's your vision if you were to look at what it might accomplish
yeah.
over time, what it already is accomplishing? What would you say?
Well, I know I can go off script with you and go into the deep end of the ocean with you. Is that right?
Wonderful.
To start with, I think I want to heal my own heart, right? I think that there's a deep longing for my own sense of belonging in community.
Yeah,
And I'm told that that vulnerability gives me a certain level of accessibility because I bring a transparency about that to the work, right?
beautiful.
There's a lot of humility that I bring too because I'm still a learner. I'm not a guru. I'm not a guru of listening. I'm interested in my own growth as much as I hope that we invite other people to become interested in their own growth. So, you know,
Mm.
I'm a pretty flawed human, but if there's one thing that I'm the most is that I'm a grower. I really do own my stuff and take a look. And if I mess up, I say, "Hey, well, gosh, how could I do that in a more loving way or in a more
Mm.
compassionate way?" And I guess in the end, I want some of that to rub off,
Mm.
right?
Beautiful, beautiful.
Yeah.
So one of the things that I noticed we talked a few months ago. I was interviewed by Traci, so we're kind of reversing the roles here just a little bit.
And it'll be out in about 3 weeks. So just
Woo!
FYI on our podcast.
Well, one of the things that you'll notice if you listen to the podcast is that there are moments of silence between us where you can just tell that Traci is listening. She says she's not a guru of listening, but I don't believe that because her listening was incredible
Mm,
um, in our chat together. And as you describe this wanting to learn and grow yourself, you and I also talked at that time about mindfulness and about a
mhm.
meditative practice. And I'm feeling like this practice, this sidewalk talk to you, is like a practice. It's something that's doing something, shifting something every
Very
time it
much.
happens, and causing growth
Yeah.
organically. Tell me
I
more.
love how you just catalog that. Yeah, it's funny because we have a lot of meditators that are volunteers. So let me just back up and say how it's set up so that your listeners can understand. This is a community-led effort. And so when somebody wants to listen on the sidewalk, they go to our website, they take a training, and they find a chapter that's held in a container by a leader, and they show up. And a lot of our volunteers that listen They come to this as a practice of their own. And so that's one thing that we ask folks. We said, I don't want you to think of this as helping people, because there's an inequality in that. And one of the volunteers said, he said, oh, it feels to me cushion to the sidewalk, but sitting down on my cushion in public, in relationship. And in many ways, that is what it is, because it's so much more than just active listening. It's a practice of relational presence that I believe sort of heals our, our brains have a long history of being pretty tribal, right? But we live in a big multicultural world, so we're gonna have to stretch our brains to grow some new skills, to sit with people that don't look like us, they don't talk like us, they don't see the world like us. And it's not going to happen through osmosis. We're going to actually have to effort for that so that we can all build this beautiful, diverse ecosystem. Healthy ecosystems are the ones that are the most diverse. And yet we don't quite know how to do that because our brains still have this old heritage of tribalism.
Beautiful. What a beautiful insight, and brilliant, really, and helpful for all of us struggling in worlds that become polarized so quickly because of that tribal inclination and the inclination to grab onto whatever the news media is that we're listening to.
Right. Oh, goodness. Yeah, don't even get me started.
Really. But what a wonderful practice, actual practice for that, to heal that, to cure that, to deal with that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Tell me more about that, about how that's being done, how you see it, how.
Yeah, I mean, so in active listening, it's a very techniquey thing. And I don't know have you ever experienced this where someone was really good at active listening, but you didn't quite feel like they were listening because it was a technique that was being used on you,
Yeah.
right? We've built a bit of a curriculum that here is the model, and it's HEAR, and it came out of, you'll love this, because I'm like, oh gosh, I have to put this in a framework that I can use. And just as true with Sidewalk Talk, I have to go into my heart. I can't go into my head to hear these things. And I was in the redwood forest in California, and sitting, writing in my journal. And I had already been sitting on the sidewalk for 3 years, but I wanted to help folks take it beyond active listening. And so what HERE stands for is, number one, H is honor. And if you think about even in Zen practice, right, you might start with a bow or a namaste. It's a deep honoring, and it's the intention to honor. Because I can't say that in every dialogue that I have as a human throughout my day, I'm honoring people, right? Because I show up very different. I'm like, I am here to honor this person's humanity, right? The E is embody, because there's so often that when we're listening, we're kind of listening from the neck up. And there's so much that's being said. I'm a couples therapist. That's how I make my living. I don't make any money off of Sidewalk Talk. And it's my couples that taught me this embodied listening, because oftentimes one member will have the capacity to speak a lot about their feelings, and the other one has a capacity to embody a lot of feelings. Sometimes they'll say, okay, we're going to practice talking about feelings, and now we're going to practice not talking about feelings and seeing what your partner's saying just in their body, right?
Yeah.
But in our bodies, we also set boundaries so that we don't have emotional contagion overwhelm us. So if we're listening to something hard, we have the capacity to regulate our nervous system so that we can stay with somebody even if something's really hard, right? The A stands for assumptions check, meaning our brains just naturally, we're not sinners or biases. Our brains just are wired to do this. We're always sorting people into who's in my tribe and who's not in my tribe. And so assumptions check is bringing this full acceptance to, hey, this is going to be part of my listening. I'm going to be tracking what assumptions I'm making of this person and have an incredible amount of self-compassion with myself,
mm,
not shame myself for it, but have the courage to notice so I can set them aside
mm,
and come right back into the purity of this connection with this person.
mm, mm,
And then the R is the reflect and respond. And it's not the same kind of reflection where you're just repeating.
mm.
Sometimes it's the essence of the bond or the quality of the connection that you're reflecting. Like, I'm really hearing how much heartache you're holding as you talk about that,
Mm, mm,
right?
mm,
Or I'm just hearing how proud you are as you share this story about parenting your son,
mm,
or and in that space, there's a sense of equality because what we're aiming to do is to, I believe that when we bear witness to each other in this way, what we do is we invite the best, most healthy parts into the foreground.
mm.
And then I wonder, George, what would happen if we were all doing that? That means we'd be engaging from our best parts of self
Yeah,
all over the place.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Traci, I have some thoughts I'd like to share, but
Share.
before I do, tell me just a little bit more about the reflect and respond, because
Yeah.
that's where it can feel formulaic at times.
Mm-hmm.
I've had the privilege to have you as a listener to me, and it was an extraordinary privilege. And that's where
Thank you.
yeah, that's why I said, this isn't some rookie here that we're that I'm talking with. This is someone who really knows what she's doing and you embody the here. In your in at least in the way I experienced you several months ago. And I'm wondering, because it's in that response, of course you can feel artificiality in any one of those layers, any one of those places. You can feel something missing.
Mm-hmm.
But sometimes the reflect and respond can be a formula. Sometimes a formula is very helpful to know the
Sure.
general outline. It's like having the keys of the piano. You know what all the keys are, but then
Mm-hmm.
it's how you put them together that makes the unique and authentic connection occur. Can you
Yeah.
tell me just a little bit more about that piece of
Yeah.
it?
Well, I will say that when we're reflecting, we're not trying to, there's a term in therapy land that says, I'm not trying to break in on anybody. So if they've only gone to a certain level of vulnerability, I'm not going to respond and go, because that can be a kind of busting down the door of their own protection mechanisms,
Right,
right? But if there is a spark of witnessing of something that when in doubt, I go for delight,
yeah,
right? When I'm
great,
reflecting and responding, it's like, what's alive here right now between the two of us? What
wonderful.
can we delight in together,
Yeah,
right? Because
yeah,
sometimes people will sit down and they'll just go on a long stream of consciousness that's very intellectual.
yeah.
And this has happened where I'll feel really lonely in the contact because I'm like,
Oh,
gosh, they're not even really aware that I'm on the other side of this contact here.
wow. Yeah, yeah,
And so the only thing that I can listen to in that moment is the tenderness of their sweet face. That's all I do. I track the words a little bit,
yeah.
but I recognize that, oh, all this talking, and I can try to act smart or talk too fast, or which I'm getting over a lot through this project. But I'm aware of how lonely it'll make me as the listener to not have them receive me, but I
Mm,
don't want to bust in on them. So I'm
yeah.
like, well, what can I listen to here with this person?
Mm,
And so that's why it's beautiful to be face to face on the sidewalk,
yeah.
because in those moments, I'll just look at their face and you can watch what they'll do.
Mm,
Thing. They'll look away and they can't quite be, and they'll talk, 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 talk. And then they'll come back to take a sip of me to see if I'm still there. And
yeah.
they're always surprised that I'm not only still there and interested, but I'm really engaged because I'm not actually engaging with the intellectual defense mechanisms. I'm really present for their sweet, sweet face.
Yeah, yeah, beautiful, beautiful. We have something similar in the life planning movement, a listening kind of practice that we do. But I want to come to the Buddhists. So briefly on the in the life planning work, One of the things we coach people to is to, of course, follow the feelings. And what we're looking to do, because also people come in, chat, 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 and it's about their retirement here and their money over here and all this and their worries and all this. And
Yeah.
what we train them to do, our advisors to do, is to listen for the high point of delight, what might inspire the person, what they're talking about that sounds like there might be some excitement, even if it's talked in a tone, well, I really like to garden, but so you could listen
Get to
for,
listen well.
you gotta listen really well, because sometimes the affect is there and sometimes it isn't. And the other thing we do is to look for the secret sorrow. And so we're looking for a high and a low. And if the person is a little too much on the low side, we go to the high. And if they feel like their affect is more very, very high, we'll see if there was a low there as well, and then just share that as a reflection, so that there's a balancing. And what happens is that, and I'm sure you're recognizing this too, is that we're building trust. It's the meeting that builds trust, and it's because we can show them that we're connected around their highs and their lows, what's really important. But so that felt I loved hearing you speak about how you do it and how you're just watching the face sometimes. I want to speak about the Buddhist aspect of this, because I just happened today to be reading about something called the 7 factors of enlightenment. And the 7 factors of enlightenment aren't necessarily what you think they are. They're factors in our that we have access to. All of us have some access to them, and the more we practice, the more we have access to them. But that when it's said that when they are in relative balance, you tend to be ripe for major leaps, for major transformation. And among them are some things that are really wonderful, connecting to your elements here. And so I wanted to just mention them. A lot of them are embodiments. So there's feeling tranquility and equanimity, and those are not just mental phenomena, but they're things that you really feel. Mindfulness itself is something that we feel in the body, and all three of those, they're 3 of the 7. Energy is another one, so that you have access to energy. But one of the really interesting ones that many people don't realize is related to your, your assumption check, which I really love. And it when a lot of times when you meditate, and particularly early on, you're thinking, oh, it's just about getting to that moment and meeting that moment and all that. And it's difficult. It's still difficult for me after 50 years, but at times.
Well, I don't believe that, but anyway.
but the wonderful thing is that what's really happening is that when you fail to meet the moment in one way or another, if you're alert and mindful, you notice. And you notice why or how. And it's often just a momentary noticing, like your assumptions check in a way. It's just noticing, oh, I was caught up holding on to my assumption.
Exactly.
I was caught up clinging to some desire or aversion that came out of that assumption. So it's just this momentary seeing into who your kind of natural neurotic self is prior, that you're working on. As you were saying at the beginning, I'm in a state of growth. And so I just wanted to share that because it stunned me that you're doing that piece of work in an engagement with another person that's very similar to a significant piece of work that a serious Buddhist practitioner will do as part of their path to awakening.
Yeah. Well, and I also think that, not everybody's practicing mindfulness in the earnest way that you are. I think we've stripped away some of the sacredness of it. And there's some, through the podcast, I've gotten to interview some longtime practitioners. And there is this distinction where sometimes when we strip away some of those deeper elements that you're describing, it can actually leave us quite lonely because we're trying to self-optimize using mindfulness. And in some ways, what Sidewalk Talk is doing gets around that because we're doing it in community,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And the idea that we're really practicing mindfulness with someone, but
Yeah.
we're practicing metta, we're practicing loving kindness meditation essentially across from somebody else
Right.
and directing that towards them.
Yeah.
And what there's, I got to interview somebody here in Germany who studied this, and our tendency to behave more compassionately in the world through this type of practice is significantly higher than certain types of self-optimization types of practice, right?
Yeah. No
And that
question.
excites me. That
No
excites me.
question. No question. Well, you've done really remarkable piece of work here and delivering it to the world. And part of it is this embodiment piece that if we can embody that person that is sidewalk talking, if we can embody that and carry that wherever we go, um, what is there to feel lonely? You know?
That's no, that's right. And so right now, all the research that we're doing, so we're starting to do some academic impact studies. It's slow going because
Yeah.
we're still largely all volunteer, even though there's 7,500 listeners now
Wow.
across 89 locations in 15 countries.
Yeah. Wow.
And so administrating something with a largely just volunteer, you understand. But slowly we have a couple academics that have been willing to put in the work to study the impact on our listeners. And that is in fact what's happening, is that their well-being is going up, their implicit bias is going down, and their capacity to take the skills back into their own lives is going up too.
Yeah, yeah, beautiful, beautiful. I promised in our engagement prior to this that I'd ask you a question or two regarding the overlap in some way between what you're doing and what we're doing. And so I want to make sure we get there. I feel like it's already that you already said it. It's already implicit in who you are and what you're delivering into the world. But thinking about it for a moment, a golden civilization, and imagining that we're there, and then imagining how it is that we move so that within a generation we make it real. It's here. It's happened. I'm wondering what your thoughts are about what you're doing. What does a golden civilization look like, and how do we make it happen?
Yeah. Well, I just want to say to everybody else that could be watching or will watch this, aren't you so glad to be thinking about this question right now in our current political climate? It's just a lovely invitation to sort of envision. And I think that's the power of what you're doing. And so I was actually really excited to answer this question with you today because my heart needed this question today. Um, so I'm going to get us embodied, and I envision a world where I walk out my door and I see faces, and I know that those faces want the best for me,
Hmm.
and that those faces that want the best for me ripple out into how we engage as a community, how we co-parent, how we do politics, and how we do economics.
Hmm.
But that embodied felt sense of seeing those faces, imagine when someone loves you, what that
Wow.
facial expression looks like.
Hmm. Beautiful. Yeah.
Imagine if our political system reflected back, I love you.
Yeah. Yeah. Beautiful. Yeah. Wow. Wow. Lovely. Wow.
That's what I want.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow. So you have a way of just encapsulating the essence of something
Mm,
so profound and so important. It's really what we all want, isn't it?
mm. Yeah.
Yeah.
We want to know we want to feel that we've come together to protect and love one another. I mean, isn't that why we come together? Isn't that what society is supposed to be about? We pool our resources and our hearts to love, protect each other.
Right. Right. What was it you just said? Because there was a space in the
Mm,
intercom. We want to know that we belong, that we.
that we belong and that we can love and protect each other,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah.
Yeah, I feel it really deeply in my heart as I say that.
Yeah.
And I can feel the, not to shame myself, but the impediments in my own heart that still make it hard. I mean, I'm still working on showing up in the world that way too. I have my own neuroses that I work on that make me scared or worried or, which is
Right.
why I still am on a path and growth, you
Yeah.
know?
And so beautiful. And so we want to belong, and yet there are two tribes and you have a choice, this tribe or that tribe.
Yeah, I'll tell you a story on that one. Are you talking about political tribes?
Might as well. Yeah.
We did a bus tour across the South in 2000 and was it 2017?
Hmm.
So it was just for a week, and there was one particular day where I had a man and he had a baseball cap on, and I didn't vote Republican. I voted Democratic, and he clearly voted Republican because he had a MAGA hat on. And he had been circling around us for a while. And he came and he says, "Free listening, huh?" And I said, "Yeah." And he said, my wife has left me after 30 years. I
Oh,
said, "She has." And he said, "Yeah." And he goes, "And she said it's because I didn't listen to her enough."
oh,
And we had this about heartache.
hmm. Wow.
And my sense of it is that I know that there are a lot of different groups that are trying to bridge political divisions. I guess where Sidewalk Talk is a little more focused on, let's start at the heart,
Yeah. Right.
and then the bridging of the divisions will come.
Right.
Because if you come forward with the desire to honor someone, you're going to find common ground. In fact, just before this call, I was talking to another city leader who's gay.
Hmm.
And he said, "I was at a concert the other night, and this guy standing next to us says, 'We got to move. I don't want to stand next to all these gay people.'" And he said, I turned around to him, I said, "Well, I'm one of them." And rather than getting defensive, he goes, "Well, so tell me a little bit more about why you feel that way about gay people." He said, "Well, that's what I was taught to believe." He goes, "Huh, I'm really sorry to hear that." And then they ended up striking up a friendship at this concert,
Wow.
sharing binoculars.
Wow. Yeah.
I
Beautiful.
mean, what does redemption and healing look like if we don't take these risks?
Beautiful. Beautiful. So, well, it's a golden civilization. It's what it looks like to me that you're building,
Mm.
and I love it. And just a practical thing: when you go and you set up, do you set up a couple of chairs? Do you have a sign that says "free listening"? What's kind of the setup there? That
Yeah. So when someone becomes a chapter leader, they have a certain set of guidelines that they have to follow.
hmm,
And then there's a wide berth that they get to kind of do their own thing outside of those guidelines. So we give them graphics. They play around, and some of them make really creative signs. Some of them use just our standard signs. So we do have signs that say free listening. Others have quotes on their signs that say listening is like being loved.
hmm,
Um, we always bring chairs because we think there's something provocative
yeah,
about being on a busy sidewalk
yeah, yeah,
where you're doing,
yeah, yeah,
and
yeah.
when you sit down, you're not doing. And it just, people are, what is going on here? In my last event in San Francisco, we had 22 listeners out. So that means there were 44 chairs taking over a sidewalk.
Woo.
And at one point they were full. And I was like just a cat who ate the canary. I was just so happy. I was like, this is great.
Oh,
Um, because the whole sidewalk changes.
right,
This place that looks like a place of disconnection and doing suddenly feels like a place of community and belonging. And we'll have somebody that's homeless, we'll have somebody that's African American, we'll have somebody that's gay, we'll have somebody that's transgender. I mean, all on the same sidewalk, having this shared experiences of ecstasy and joy and longing and loss in the same place.
yeah, yeah. Wow, wow. So what I love about your description there is that, you're just an incredible mix yourself of a human being in that you have accessed and embody uh, this learning and heart and listening side of things, this quiet side. And yet there's a part of you that's a real provocateur.
Oh,
And and out there, and
you're not getting to see that side. I think a lot of the volunteers would say, George isn't getting a good sense of Traci. No, I'm going to say it, George. I'm a shit disturber.
Yeah, you're fearless. Yeah, I love it. I love it. And I think it's one of the things, I think we carry both those things a lot in common in our own.
Oh, there's a whole side to you I don't know. I can't wait.
Beautiful, beautiful. Let's see, I had one more thought here. In the, do you have any thought about how or if a sidewalk talk could also include the question I just asked you about a golden civilization?
I don't know. We'll have to daydream it up. The one difference between what you're doing and what I'm doing is we have no agenda beyond creating connection on the sidewalk. So we're not trying to take people anywhere. Right. And that largely stems from the social justice roots. I didn't say this piece, but you know, we had a lot of gun violence in the United States at the time that this came up. And specifically, we had African Americans being shot by police. And I'm like, I just need to sit and listen and not throw my voice around here. I need to hear from people of all faiths, all races, all genders, all identities, because that's how I'm meant to be an activist. But I couldn't not do it. I had a lot of friends that were writing think pieces, and I mean, I go to protests and things like that too, but this is my kind of protest. That's how I do it.
Yeah.
Show up in love.
So in the life planning work that I've taught for 20, 30 years, we start from that place of just listening. People come in expecting to talk about this, that, or the other way. No. I just want to listen to you. And I want to hear who you know, whatever you want to say, basically. And
yeah.
Why are you here? And in this life, just want to listen. And it's in the second meeting that we begin to go to a larger, this other thing, which is, well, what would you like to deliver? What would you like to see? Who would you really like to be? And so we go to a visionary place. And that's why I was just thinking that at the end of a real period of listening where the person really feels authentically met and authenticated and valued and honored, if you were to ask some question, what we found is that moving to vision from the listening tends to get people energized and active. And so that's what we like about ending with that. We don't have an agenda as to what their answer is, as to where they're going, but we ask a visionary question at the end, which is completely for them, entirely for them. Not for
well, I think some of our listeners do end that way. This is where they get to bring their selfhood to the listening, right? And some of them do ask. So, you know, some of them ask, what might you be doing after this? You know, or what was this like? Or something, especially if someone's in a hard place, we might ask some questions about how they're going to take care of themselves. Yeah.
Wow. What beautiful work.
I feel the same about you. I feel like I should have been taking notes, but I can watch this back and take them later.
I've already been taking notes to see certain parts of this. Wonderful, Traci. Well, I hope we do get a chance to meet soon in Europe or possibly back in the States again. But this has been really wonderful.
Yeah.
Let's keep in touch.
Yeah. Thank you so much, George.
Thank you.
My heart needed this today. Thank you.
Oh, mine too. Thank you so much.
All right.
Bye.